Hi, William Tramp here, also known as This Effin' GM. I want to talk today about settings. I love settings for tabletop role-playing games. I love collecting all the books. I love reading through the lore, seeing different types of adventures and themes and tones that these settings provide. And if I could, I would own every single setting book that exists. I already have a ton of them. Settings like Dragonlance, Zeitgeist, Forgotten Realms, Eberron, Glorion, Tal'Dorei, Midgard, and Rokugan. Today, I want to focus on one specific setting. The newest setting, the newest setting book to be released by Wizards of the Coast. Of course, I'm talking about Planescape, Adventures in the Multiverse. Is saving the town from bandits just not enough for you? Then try Planescape! Planescape is all about traveling the planes of the Great Wheel cosmology, meeting fantastic peoples that inhabit these planes, and exploring the great philosophical questions, such as, who are we? Who are the gods? What if we're already dead? In a nutshell, while most gaming groups are seated around the table trying to figure out what to do about the latest goblin problem, Planescape is the setting that kicks down the door and says, "Hey, get in, losers! Heaven and hell are at it again, and we have to save existence." Disclaimer number one. I was provided these books for free by Wizards of the Coast. Thanks, Wizards. Now, I want to be super clear about this. Wizards of the Coast has no expectation of me saying anything positive about these books at all. There is no expectation for me to say anything about these books at all. I just want to talk about them today. Disclaimer number two. There's going to be some spoilers in this video. I'm reviewing an entire book. Actually, 3 books. And it's going to be difficult not to talk about the contents in them. So, if you don't want to hear any spoilers, maybe check out one of my other videos. You can see an example right up here. Okay, let's get going. So let's go ahead and get the basics out of the way. What are you even purchasing here? Well, there are 2 separate Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse products out there right now, although they both have the exact same contents. One version of Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse looks like this. This features art of The Lady of Pain by Tyler Jacobson. The second you might see is the special edition cover typically found at friendly local game stores, featuring art by Tony DiTerlizzi. For those of you who don't know, Tony DiTerlizzi provided all of the interior art for the original Planescape box set. This is not the box set. I had to get this off of DM's Guild because I don't have $300 to spend right now. The art is fantastic, and Tony DiTerlizzi is basically synonymous with the tone and feel of Planescape because of that interior art. So it's really great that they were able to bring him back to get this cover. Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse, Planescape and Adventures in the Multiverse, layout, is presented to us as a box set, or more accurately, a slipcase, filled with books and tools to help you jumpstart your adventures in the multiverse. We start with Sigil and the Outlands, your guide to the main hub of the Planescape setting. After that, we get to Mort's Planar Parade, a monster manual for the Planescape setting. Then we see Turn of Fortune's Wheel, a starter adventure for Planescape, and we also get a 4-panel Dungeon Master screen. We also get a fold-out map found in the back of Sigil and the Outlands. This map covers both the Outlands and the city of Sigil, but I'm terrified to pull this out of my book because it has these little perforated edges. Does anybody else get a lot of anxiety about these perforated edge maps? Every single time I try to pull them out, I always end up ripping the freaking map, so often I just leave them in. This set comes with a lot of great things, and while I would love to spend an entire hour talking about every single one that comes in the set, my wife has informed me that most people probably don't want to listen to me for that long. She sure doesn't. So I'm going to focus my attention today on Sigil and the Outlands. In my opinion, as a Dungeon Master, Sigil and the Outlands has the most pertinent information that I need to start running adventures in the setting. So let's go ahead and get started. So in Sigil and the Outlands, we first start off with an introduction letting us, the reader, know what Planescape is kind of all about. Then we hit Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is dedicated to character options. In that chapter, we get 2 new backgrounds, a number of feats, some new spells, and some brand new magic items. Now, the backgrounds, we have two to choose from. We have the Gate Warden and we have the Planar Philosopher. The Gate Warden background is for those characters who have been raised or spent a lot of time near a portal to another plane. Now, this may come from living in Sigil, it may come from being raised in one of the gate towns, or maybe you're somewhere on the prime material plane near some sort of magical planar portal that, heck, maybe nobody even knew anything about, but it had some sort of impact on your character. On the other hand, your character may choose the Planar Philosopher background. The Planar Philosopher background entails that your character holds some sort of belief or conviction about the nature of the multiverse or about the nature of the planes themselves. Some sort of universal truth that your character is seeking to explore. Now, the Planar Philosopher background ties in directly to the factions of Sigil, which are a huge part of the Planescape setting. Now, regardless of which of these two backgrounds you choose, your character's going to end up with the Scion of the Outer Planes feat as the feature of both of those backgrounds. The Scion of the Outer Planes feat serves as the core of a brand new feat tree that exists within this book. These feats are all designed to give your character a close connection to one or more types of planes of existences that Planescape centers around. Now, there's sort of an oddity, though, about the Scion of the Outer Planes feat. When you take this feat, you have to choose a categorization of outer plane, typically along the lines of some sort of alignment component, like law, chaos, good, or evil. The thing is that nowhere in this book does it actually explain what alignment corresponds with what plane. That you have to get somewhere else, namely the Dungeon Master's Guide or Mort's Planar Parade. Those are the only two books that I've seen, at least, that includes the chart of planes and associated alignment. That's something to keep in mind. Now, as for new spells, we've got two. Warp Sense, which allows a caster to be able to sense magical portals around them, and Gate Seal, which allows a caster to seal off a portal of some sort. My guess is it was probably created by the Lady of Pain. And finally, Chapter 1 rounds out with 3 new magic items: the Portal Compass, the Sensory Stone, and my favorite, the Mimir. The Mimir is kind of like a robotic skull that floats around just giving you a bunch of information. Think of Navi from Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time, but far less annoying and a lot more metal. In Chapter 2, we start to hit the meat of the text. Chapter 2 is dedicated to Sigil, the City of Doors. Okay, let me take a moment to explain Sigil to you. I want you to imagine the plane of neutrality, whatever that may look like, but in this case, we call it the Outlands. Now, in the middle of this plane is this impossibly tall spire, and at the top of that spire is a giant stone torus. Do you know what a torus is? I didn't know what a torus is. Let me start over. In the middle of this plane is this impossibly tall spire, and floating just above that spire is a stone donut. Now, I want you to imagine this donut for a second. Let's just take a moment to imagine a donut, right? So you have a donut, and what if that donut were hollow on the inside? Now, take that hollowed out cavity and then build a city within it, using the new inner surface as the ground for the city. So you could be standing right here on top of a building and you look straight up and there's more buildings. This is Sigil, the City of Doors. Well, maybe also don't forget to toss in about an infinite number of portals to anywhere in the multiverse. Also toss in probably the most diverse population you can imagine. Oh, also toss in some of the craziest locations that you can find in a city. Really, Sigil, the City of Doors is kind of like, what if you took every single fantasy city that was a bit wacky in some way and then put it all into one and make sure that everybody's fighting each other with philosophy. That's Sigil, the City of Doors. Now, granted, obviously, this chapter has a lot more to say about Sigil than I just did. So, as you read through it, you're going to get a good idea of the population, the lives that they live, ways that they travel in and out of the city. We're then going to discover some of the special services that you can only find in Sigil, as well as some of the unique nuisances that they have to face, like Razorvine or Cranium Rats. Cranium Rats are rats with their brains exposed and psychic powers. Big brain rats with big brain ideas. One of my favorite things that this book pitches is the idea that there is a collective collective of cranium rats called the Us that all speak in this sort of we sort of way because they're a gigantic hive mind and it lives somewhere within the city with unknown motives. That's weird, but I kind of feel like that same thing exists in my house when winter comes. Anyway, after we go through a brief primer as to how people live in the city of Sigil, we then jump into a section about portals. Sigil is all about portals. I want you to imagine that there's a portal somewhere. And I want you to imagine that all of the portals are in one place and it's Sigil. That's sort of the idea. Sometimes I feel like that the inhabitants of Sigil can't help but trip over one portal to land into another portal and somehow end up in the 8th Helibator. Now the portals are pretty neat, and this section of the book comes with a couple of different random tables that you can roll on to decide what form the portal takes and where this thing is going to take it. Because the thing is, there is a portal to everywhere in Sigil. Because Sigil is sort of in the center of the multiverse, or the center of all the planes. Or it's nowhere. They're not really clear on that, but that's okay, because that's what philosophy's for. Now, after we talk about the portals, we get into some of the key players in the city of Sigil, namely the Lady of Pain. The Lady of Pain is the enigmatic, god-like figure that rules unquestioned in the city of Sigil. Now, even though the Lady of Pain is unquestionably the leader of Sigil, she sort of handles mostly the big picture stuff, like keeping the gods out, kicking the gods out, killing the gods that enter her city, or anybody that would worship her as a god at all. The rest of the day-to-day she leaves to the factions, which is what we get into next. There are countless factions in Sigil. Now, the book names the Big 12. For those of you who know older Planescape, it may not look like the same 12 that you are used to, but don't forget that the very last adventure ever released for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was the Faction Wars, where things were shaken up quite a bit. Some of those factions are altogether gone. Some of them have been combined into new factions. Philosophies change as the times change. So what we get in this portion of the book are the 12 main factions that currently run Sigil. Each faction is ruled by one philosophy. This is the way that this faction looks at the multiverse or looks at the state of existence and determines how it functions. Now, the planet philosophies are kind of interesting. One of the ones that caught my eye was the Bleak Cabal. The Bleak Cabal is a very nihilistic faction that believes that there is no truth, no ultimate meaning in the universe. Wah, wah. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do everything we can to help our fellow man. So this faction spends a lot of its time feeding the poor, housing the homeless, and generally being all around good guys. Bleak Cabal, more like hell yeah Cabal. That could have been cleverer. Other factions are not so benevolent. Take, for instance, the Harmonium. The Harmonium preaches the philosophy of peace by any means necessary. Or take the Mercy Killers. The Mercy Killers believe that cold, relentless justice is absolute, and anyone who tries to rise above it will be knocked down so far their grandmothers will feel it, or something along those lines. As you can imagine, these guys function as the prison force of Sigil. I would have to say one of my favorites would be the Heralds of Dust. The Heralds of Dust believe that we're all already dead. Now, this isn't the afterlife. There's a true afterlife waiting later on, but everybody that they see right now, dead. Everybody that they will see later, dead. They themselves, dead. We're all dead. We're all dead.
We're all dead.
They function as the morticians of the city. Planescape bills itself and has billed itself for a long time as a setting filled with philosophers with clubs. Because these factions, for the most part, don't really get along. Sure, they all provide a vital service to the city. Sure, some of them ally with one another on occasions. But ultimately, they're prone to kicking each other's asses all over the place because really, they all can't be right. The rest of Chapter 2 is dedicated to the Gazetteer, in which this book explains the 6 wards of Sigil. Now, I love a good city-setting book. I love my copy of Sharn, the City of Towers, and I love the fact that Sharn has so many districts. Except Sharn has a lot of districts. Sharn has a lot of districts. Man, I heard that motherfucker had like 30 goddamn districts. This book keeps it nice and tight and makes sure that Sigil has only 6 wards that you gotta mess with. Now, each ward gets its own section in which we get a brief explanation of the ward, a list of random encounters that we may expect to see in there. I wish Sharn would have had that. A list of the main factions that exist within that ward, and then anywhere from 5 to 10 key locations that you would expect to find while traveling through this portion of the city. These locations can range anywhere from a inn or tavern that seems interesting, a shop that maybe your PCs might want to frequent, and of course, all of the faction headquarters. A lot of the faction headquarters come with this really neat art where you kind of a picture of the faction headquarters as well as kind of a map. I say kind of a map because it's not keyed, and for most of these locations, most of these faction headquarters, it's not a full map. I kind of wish we would have gotten that, but it's okay that we didn't. I still would love to have prints of these locations so I can hang them up on my walls. They are gorgeous. Chapter 2 finishes itself out with a number of random tables designed to help the Dungeon Master create brand new adventures within Sigil. We've got encounter tables for adventure hooks, we've got encounter tables for faction missions, we even have an encounter table for calamities within Sigil. Without warning, the Lady of Pain sends 2/3 of Sigil's population to the mazes. It's up to the characters to figure out why. A portal to the front lines of the Blood War opens in the lower ward, bringing the conflict to the city. The Lady of Pain decrees that Sigil will dance the Macarena till the end of time. Okay, one of those may not be true, but I do love the idea that there's an entire table dedicated to just calamities. Now, there's one more random encounter table, which is random encounters within the city at large. Now, even though each of the different wards had its own, they still decided to give us one gigantic random encounter table in case you get a little bored of the others that you've already rolled on. The final chapter, Chapter 3, wait, there's only 3 chapters in this book? Yeah, they're really long chapters. Focuses on the Outlands. The Outlands can be best thought of as the plane of neutrality. The Outlands is in the center of the Great Wheel cosmology, and if every other plane of existence is related to an alignment of some sort, the Outlands is right in the middle, being pulled in every possible direction. As a result, the Outlands has become a mosaic of all of the other planes in one area, with Sigil rising up from the spire right in the middle of it. Now, Chapter 3 focuses a bit on explaining to us what life in the Outlands is like, giving us an idea of the very diverse populace and the various gate towns. One thing that gets explained here, although I wish it would be explained a little more, is the idea of cosmic realignment. Cosmic realignment is an Outlands phenomenon that when a certain gate town gets a little too harmonious with the plane of existence that its gate travels to, that plane will then swallow up the gate town to make it a part of it. So basically, if you act in a certain way that is just way too close to a plane of existence's alignment and you're near that gate, you're going to become a part of that plane. It's like hungry hippos, right? Except for the hungry hippos aren't different colors. They have different philosophies and are trying to eat each other but can't quite reach across the table. Of particular note, remember that fold-out map that I mentioned before? Well, one side is dedicated entirely to the Outlands and its environments. Now, it's not to scale, because that's kind of the thing about the Outlands. It's an infinite plane, and there's no real cardinal directions, and a mile doesn't really mean much because the plane's distances are constantly shifting. A quick note about cardinal directions: people who live in the Outlands or the gate towns don't refer to north, east, south, or west. They don't exist in this plane of existence. Rather, they refer to every sort of distance or direction in terms of the great spire that rises within the middle of the plane. Things are either spireward, headed towards the spire, or they're brinkward, headed away. Another cool thing to know about the Outlands is that if you look at the picture or a map of the Outlands, it seems to be one large disk. Now, remember, these are infinite planes of existence, so you could, technically speaking, walk right up to where the gate town is at the very edge of that map, and you can keep on walking infinitely. But if you were to turn back around, you would see the gate town is about 10 minutes away. Well, as you can imagine, the bulk majority of the chapter of the Outlands focuses on the gate towns. There are 16 gate towns, one associated with each major outer plane that exists within the Outlands. Each gate town is presented as a 2-page spread that gives us a good amount of information to get started with using that gate town. We get information such as who's in charge, what kind of people live there, and what plane of existence is it attached to. Then we get an explanation of the gate, whatever fantastical gate that this town has to move on to that next plane of existence. After that, each one comes with 3 different locations of places that you may want to check out while you're in town, with the sole exception of Ecstasy, which for some reason gets 4. Well, I guess True Good gets the good stuff. At some point in the 2-page description, you get a little random table for adventures that you can run within that gate town. Now, each gate town is kind of presented as a small microcosm of the plane of existence that it's attached to. But each gate town also has to be worried about cosmic realignment. So as a result, the people of these towns tend to do their best to make sure it's not fully a microcosm of that outer plane. Probably the best example in the book of cosmic realignment and how it associates with the gate town would be found in the description of the gate town Faunal. Faunal is attached to the wilderness of the Beastlands, and at some point in the near past, Faunal, the original gate town, was swallowed up by that plane of existence. It just got too chaotic good. So now, Faunal exists as a number of small camps of different groups trying to re-find the city and make a brand new one where they're going to do it right this time. I think one of my favorite examples of a gate town is Plague Mort. Plague Mort is the gate town that's associated with the Abyss, and it is just as much of a shithole as you can imagine. Now, Plague Mort is led by a lawful, evil tyrant. And what I love about this is it kind of represents the Blood War. Here, a lawful evil NPC has found a chaotic evil Bashan and decided, no, we're going to tame this and also avoid cosmic realignment. But because the Abyss be the Abyss, forces from beyond the gate are constantly trying to corrupt the person who's in charge so that way it can swallow it up, because the Abyss wants to swallow it all. O Arc Lector Bex, we will hardly know ye. The end of Chapter 3 and the end of Sigil in the Outlands wraps up with a list of various locations of interest within the greater Outlands. These locations may include the walking castles that you may find traveling the plane, may include certain landmarks that are very well known to travelers and the denizens of the Outlands, and also include realms of lesser known gods, like Ilsen Seen, the god of the Mind Flayers. Remember that guy? Of course, some people may recognize a brand new city to be introduced to the Outlands. Instead of Sum of All, the city that was once based at the very center of the spire, instead we get Dendratus. Dendratus is inhabited by the Romani, a lawful neutral race of constructs that exists to fix the spire, I guess. You see, the spire has anti-magic properties. Magic just simply doesn't work when you're very close to the spire itself. In fact, in old Planescape editions, magic was wonky all over the plane, depending on how far away you were from the spire. In current lore, the spire is considered to have anti-magic within a certain small radius of it, and within that radius is a city of the Romani called Sum of All. Well, it used to be called Sum of All. Now it's called Dendratus. Is it the same city? Is it a different city? We're not sure. The text doesn't explain it. But what we do know is that the Romani spend a lot of their time fixing up the spire and making sure that any damage caused to it eventually goes away. Now, what's really interesting is right next to the spire, currently, there's a massive gash, and according to the lore, there may be a god hidden somewhere within there, or at least the corpse of one. Vecna, anyone? But much smarter people than myself have commented on this. So that's it. That's Sigil in the Outlands, at least from a here's what's in it perspective. Next, I want to talk about things that I liked about this book. And then I want to talk a little bit about things that I didn't like as much. When talking about the stuff that I liked about Planescape, I feel I should give a third disclaimer. Disclaimer number 3. I have never played or looked at Planescape prior to this 5th edition release. My knowledge of Planescape comes purely through cultural osmosis, spending a lot of time online, looking through Wikipedia pages, watching videos, but I've never actually owned a book. I've never actually read a book. I've never actually played in a game, and I certainly haven't played Planescape Torment, anything in regards to the setting. So I came to this relatively fresh. Now, for some of you, heresy. For others of you, hey, you recognize, as I do, that I get to see this with fresh eyes. And I want to say, I like a lot of this book. I like a lot of the content. I really like Planescape. I think that Planescape is a wonderful setting. Honestly, as somebody who loves Eberron a ton, I kind of feel like Planescape may be a better setting for the types of games I like to run because it has everything I really like about Eberron. Corporate greed, strange, wondrous locations, a diverse people. Not everybody has to be the specific alignment the monster manual says. Are the gods actually real? Does it matter if the gods are actually real? I don't think it matters if the gods are actually real. I'm really focused on this gods thing, but I feel it doesn't have some of the things I don't care that much about, or it's at least a lot easier to ignore. Things like psionics. Psionics! I really don't care about psionics. Wah wah. Anyway, Planescape is a wonderful setting, and I can definitely see myself running adventures in it. So I'm a big fan. But I can also recognize that there needs to be more. I want more. We'll talk about that here in a second. So things that I really liked about this. First, I love settings. I've already said that. I'm very biased towards this. This setting is presented in such a way that it's easy to understand. It's not too complicated. I don't have to have a ridiculous amount of different notes for 30 different wards. I get 6, and I think that's awesome. I also think that the Outlands functions really well as a potential sandbox. There's so much to do out there. It's amazing. And if you don't know what to do next, pop on through a portal and screw it, you're somewhere else. This can work really well as a sandbox world. It can work really well as a episodic campaign setting. It can work really well for just getting a bit of that weird into it. And I like weird. Also, I like a lot of the art. I know that Tony DiGiorlizzi is the guy when it comes to Planescape art, and his depictions of the Lady of Pain are iconic. There is no denying that. But there are a lot of other really good artists that have come in to start helping make this feel just as amazing as it did before. In particular, I do want to call out Tyler Jacobson. Tyler Jacobson made the cover for the normal box set of Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse. And I think he nailed the look of the Lady of Pain and really captured the feel of the original Planescape, including using the same colors for the background. I noticed it. I hope you noticed it too. I think Tyler did solid work. Now, this isn't to say that other artists in the book didn't do solid work. They did. But I really just thought that Wizards nailed it by getting Tyler to do that cover. Solid job, man. When I was trying to compile a list of things I didn't particularly like about this book, I started to realize that there was a common theme throughout this. And that theme was, where's the rest of it? Now, to be fair, when I was first looking online at people's reactions to Planescape, one of the most common reactions I saw was, it doesn't have as much as the original Planescape. Now, I initially took that to mean that the box set had way more than this version did. So I went and picked up the box set, or at least the box set in book form. And I started flipping through it, and at least from what I can see, the same stuff is in here. Well, sort of. The same stuff in that box set is in 5th edition. Whatever wasn't included in the original box set is found already scattered throughout 5th edition because Planescape is now considered to be part of the core canon. For example, in Sigil and the Outlands, we don't get an explanation of all the different planes, and at first, that was a little jarring, until I remembered that the Dungeon Master's Guide has an entire chapter devoted to the other planes of existence. I also thought, what about all the wonderful and weird different races or ancestries that players can play from Planescape? Well, a lot of those are already inside of core 5th edition. The Tieflings, for instance, the Aasimar, they were a big part of original Planescape. Now, they're just a big part of the game. But we're still missing a couple, and I'm not going to deny that either. Where's our Modrons? I want to have my wee little robot race. Spelljammer got Auto Gnomes, Eberron got Warforged, but where's my Modrons? Also, the Barrier. What am I supposed to do with that? We don't have a Barrier race for my players to play. I guess they can play Centaurs. It feels like there's something a little missing. But to be fair, it's not missing as much from that box set as I originally thought. Then I realized what people were actually saying. Wizards of the Coast has a habit of releasing a brand new setting and then offering no official support for it. Now, to be fair, they do still have the DM's Guild, and a lot of those old supplements for Ravenloft, Dragonlance, Greyhawk, and now Planescape can be found on DM's Guild, and a lot of it is print on demand, so we can still get a hold of it. But there's something to be said about an official new release, something that feels good about it. And we don't really get that anymore when Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition releases new content. We get the one book, and then you're kind of set on your way. I want more. And a lot of people want more. I think it's fair to say that when some people share their complaints about 5th edition Planescape, they're not saying, this book doesn't have as much as this book. What they're actually saying is, this edition doesn't have as much to offer fans as this edition did. And that's a fair statement. So I think right now, Wizards of the Coast has an interesting opportunity. Now, Wizards of the Coast could go about business as normal, release the setting, then hope everybody figures out that they can go to DM's Guild or eBay or Amazon and find those older supplements, buy them, and they're good to go. Or Wizards of the Coast could commit. They could start releasing supplements. They could ignore their normal release schedule and throw that out because, frankly, we don't really want it anyway. And instead start giving us more for these wonderful settings that we either have loved for years or want to love in the years to come. Ball's in your court, guys. Another issue I had with this box set is an issue of tone. One of the best parts about the Planescape setting isn't the fantastic locations or the diverse peoples, although both of those are great, but it's the tone of the setting. And a lot of that tone comes from the art, comes from the language, and comes from the types of adventures that you would be expected to find within the setting. Again, when talking about art, I love a lot of the art in this book. There's no denying that there are some great depictions in here, but there's not really one single direction in tone, which is something that the original Planescape did very well. Tony DiTerlizzi designed all of the interior artwork for the original setting. So as a result, Tony DiTerlizzi basically decided the visual tone of Sigil and the Outlands. And I think that's something we missed out on a little bit here. Now, another choice that this Planescape box set made was to kind of pay homage to the idea of alignment, but not really lean into it. The original Planescape leaned into alignment hard, like really hard. It's basically the foundation for all of the factions, which is one of the best parts about the Planescape system, are the factions. But in this case, alignment sort of takes a step back. You'll remember that they don't even include that little chart. Let it go, Will. Okay. Alignment takes a bit of a step back. And while it's nodded to, I feel like they could have done a lot more with it. But I know that it's also a very contentious subject. I, for one, don't want to see lawful good only paladins come back. I'm tired of it, because otherwise we have to have 9 different classes for a champion of every single possible class. And but that doesn't mean that it has to be ignored entirely. And I feel that we lost a little bit of the charm when we took out that alignment component. Now, I know it's controversial to some, but this book doesn't have the can't in it. All right. Okay. Let me just be honest. I am so happy that this new book is not written in the can't. I know! Look, as a dungeon master, trying to get an understanding of the setting and trying to get a feel for the types of adventures that we could run into, the cant is cool. It is really cool, despite some of the words actually meaning things that the writers probably didn't intend. But I don't want to play let's decipher the text just to play this game. I don't want to do it. It sucks. And a final note on tone are the types of adventures that we would expect to see run in this world. Now, I'm not going to talk about Turn of the Fortune's Wheel today. We will get to that later. But the adventure hooks that we get feel a little childish. Now, again, we have to be fair about this. When Planescape originally was released, it wasn't a product that was designed for 12-year-old kids. On the other hand, Wizards of the Coast acknowledges that a lot of their audience are young people. So this is not going to be a book filled with mature content. And I, as an older man, need to accept that. It's so hard to accept it. Why isn't everything made for me? But I have to accept that. And as a result, it feels a little childish on occasion with what types of adventures are presented here. But that's okay. I've got my own twisted imagination to fix that up. Most of my other complaints are relatively minor. I think that cosmic realignment should have been baked into each one of the gate towns so we'd have an idea of about where each gate town stands in terms of how close are they to being swallowed up by the other plane. That would have been neat. Maybe a little graphic meter telling us. I also think it would have been nice if we had the actual chart of what planes are associated with what alignment. This should have been included in Sigil and the Outlands. It is included in the box set. Again, you can see it in Mort's Plane and Parade, but it should have been in this book where it's referenced a lot. I also would have liked to see more robust random encounter tables for each specific district. I think that's something that has been missing in a lot of city setting books. I know I wish Sharn would have had a much better one, and I wish that Everon Rising from the Last War would have fixed that mistake. Now, granted, a lot of my desire from that comes from what I would say is the greatest city setting ever created, which is Ptolus by Monte Cook. Ptolus by Monte Cook is insanely detailed with what is inside of that city. It is designed for Ptolus to be the whole setting, one city, and it feels like it. And I know that many people play Sigil the same way. Now, I'm not saying that Wizards of the Coast should be creating an entire setting book that costs $150. Thanks, Monty Cook. But I am saying that I would have liked some more meat in there. Maybe like handouts for what you can find at various restaurants, little menus, or maybe some examples of some like postings by law enforcement or recruitment flyers for the factions. I think that would have been really cool. In conclusion, I know that I only talked about one book out of the 3 that are presented in this slipcase. The next review I do is going to cover the other 2. I'm not going to lie, it's hard for me to do an entire review based on one single monster manual, Mort's Plane and Parade, because it's just like, hey, I like that this monster is here. I wish they would have had this. And that's pretty much what that portion of the review is going to be centered around. Either way, do I think that this box set is worth it? Yes. Absolutely, I do. Part of that is because it's a fine product, despite missing a few things. Second, I think that the more people who enjoy it, the more chance we have that Wizards puts out more products. That kind of seems to be how a lot of businesses operate. But even that aside, the third reason I think people should get it is it's wonderful. I think Planescape is an awesome setting, and I want to see more people play in it. And again, even though we may never see another 5th edition book come out for the setting, we have tons of these books still available on the DMs Guild at really reasonable prices. Look, I'm not being paid by DMs Guild to say this. I just literally filled my cart up with like 20 different books, and it was like just about $200 like for 20 books. It's nuts. I love it. Plus, some of the best writers that I personally enjoy worked on those previous Planescape books, like Dave Cook, Monty Cook, again, the guy with Ptolus, the city that also has a gigantic spire with some weirdness at the top. Monty Cook loves spires, and many, many others. So there is a wealth of information out there, and you can't go wrong by getting started with this particular box set. Plus, the amount of stuff that you can harvest from this, Oh, I can absolutely see Mimirs, those little robot skulls, showing up in pretty much every single major city I run now. I freaking love that idea. Plus, what's the deal with those guys who just speak in emojis? I forgot what they are called. The Davis! I love the Davis. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the monster manual. Look, I think this is absolutely worth your time and money. You can find Sigil in the Outlands, or really, you can find that in the slipcase. You can find the slipcase, Planescape, Adventures in the Multiverse at your friendly local gaming stores, at your favorite online retailer, or even on D&D Beyond if you prefer those digital versions. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me here today to talk about one of those 3 books. I'll be back in a few weeks to talk about the rest of it. Have a good one.